gospel message comes from Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. Jesus' Transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and brought them to the top of a very high mountain. He was transformed in front of them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with Jesus. Peter reacted to all of this by saying to Jesus, "Lord, it's good that we're here. If you want, I'll make 3 shrines, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, look, a bright cloud overshadowed them. A voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I dearly love. I am very pleased with him. Listen to him." Hearing this, the disciples fell on their faces, filled with awe. But Jesus came and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Don't tell anybody about the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead."
I have a hard time imagining what the disciples witnessed that day. It must have been an oh my gosh moment with capital O, capital M, capital G, great big font, because it's just more than they could handle. And you know what happens when something hits you that's more than you can handle. We have it once in a while. We have a glorious moment when God breaks in. More often we have it when something breaks out. We look and our bodies respond before we even know it. The adrenaline starts pumping, the heart rate goes up, the blood pressure rises, the stomach clutches, and we are running on fear, fight or flight. I understand that grizzly bears, they found out, have adrenaline flowing through their bodies all the time. They just run on it, which is why it's so dangerous to come upon a grizzly, because you don't know whether that grizzly is going to go into flight or stay in fight. And if it stays in fight, you're in trouble. Driven by this bodily reality that responds to what happens suddenly. And nothing was more sudden for Peter, James, and John than to go up on that mountain with Jesus. Okay, another retreat. Here we go. And all of a sudden, bam! Jesus turned so bright, you can't look right at him. He's shining like light itself. It's preposterous. It's unreal. We have a hard time believing it really happened, and yet Peter in his letter said, we saw it. And we heard what God had to say. And it's Peter that sees Elijah and Moses with Jesus, and he's all beside himself. Oh, this is wonderful. I want to keep this forever. Let's build 3 shrines, 3 booths, and we'll keep it here forever. That's mountaintop experiences are like that, aren't they? If any of you have been on the Walk to Emmaus retreat, anybody? Yes, we have a few. You know, at the top of that mountain, you are deeply praying that it will never end. It's 72 hours of encountering God. And then you have to come home. And they have a meeting afterwards called the 4th day to help people come down off the mountain. Because it takes that. Jesus does not even try to explain the vision. He just lets it be. But he does have 4 things, 4 suggestions of how to come down the mountain. The first is, get up. You know, they're laying there in a fetal position, trembling, hiding their heads. praying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And Jesus reaches down and says, Peter, get up. James, John, get up. You can't stay there. You know, when something really bad happens, somebody is ripped out of our lives, a job disappears, whether just by the fact that jobs disappear, or maybe you got crossways with a boss or did something that wasn't right, and all of a sudden you are crouching and curled up in a fetal. I know. I've been there. Walked into a job one day and the boss said, we don't need you anymore. He had a long list of reasons. And I was crouched up in a fetal position, emotionally. Jesus comes, and the very first thing he says is, get up. You can't just lay there. You can't just wallow in it. Get up. It's not going to be easy, but you get up. And then he says, come down. We can't stay there on that place where this remarkable or terrible thing has happened. We can't just stand around and talk about it. We have this instinct to. Have you ever been in a disaster? Maybe even just a car wreck or a problem where everybody just stands around, talks about it. When we were at Genoa, we had people who had to pull off the highway because of the winter storm. And that's all they could talk about was where they were going, what they were doing, and this thing that had changed their lives on and on. Have the same problem when we're missing somebody in our lives, and that's all our minds want to go on about, round and round and round. And Jesus says, come on down. Come on down. We've got to move on. You know, in the Jewish tradition, rabbis tell grieving widows or widowers, the first thing is they are not to wear leather for 1 month. That means you're not supposed to put shoes on. If you can't put shoes on, you can't go out. You have to get up, and then when you put the leather on, you have to come on down. Because it's time to return off the mountain or out of the pit and back to reality. But as they're going down, Jesus says, keep quiet about this. Now, that's hard for us to handle. You know, today, when there is a tragedy at school, say at Columbine or Sandy Hook or any place that there is some kind of a rough thing that happens, even when a child dies, first thing we do is we bring in all the counselors and we have the kids talk about it. Maybe that's not such a good idea immediately. Jesus says keep quiet about it for now, because you don't know what it is. You won't connect this remarkable moment on the mountaintop with the rest of the story if you run right down and talk to the other disciples and say, guess what we saw? Guess what Jesus showed to us? She gets all confused then. Or talking about over and over about how terribly I've been treated because my job disappeared. Or how tough it is when we have to move. Or when everything changes for whatever reason, we go on and on and on. Jesus says, for now, keep quiet about it. Not hold it in and just pretend it's not there and not try to deny it ever happened. Just don't try to process it with everybody until you understand what's happening. A lot of times, we don't understand what God has done until sometime later. We have to look back And then we start seeing the fingerprints of God that get us to this particular point on this particular day. Right? In Exodus, Moses wanted to see God up there on the mountaintop. And God said, no, you cannot handle it. Mortals cannot see my face. But Moses says, but please, I want to see you. So God says, okay, I want you to stand in the cleft of rock there, that crack in the rock. Go back. So that now you have blinders on both sides. You cannot see that much. And then as God walked by, God held out his hand and held it over Moses' eyes as he walked by. So that all that Moses saw when the hand was removed was God's backside. And the rabbis say this is because we cannot face God in the here and now. It is too awesome and unbelievable to break through this universe and see the glory and the complete otherness of God, shining as white as light, hidden by the light, according to one of the hymns. But we can see God if we look back and see God's backside. See where God has been. That's what we do here. We keep looking back. We look back at Scripture. We look back at stories of our tradition. We look back in our own lives. And we try to see, how do we identify the fingerprints of God? And that means watching and waiting for the right time. And then, Jesus says, when the right time comes, when the Son of Man is raised from the dead, and I'm sure the disciples said, yeah, what does that mean? He says, you have no idea. But when the Son of Man is raised from the grave, then you will understand. And then it's time to go out and yell about it. Share it with everyone. That's the power of this whole story. Only after Jesus is crucified and returns do you understand what the Transfiguration means. It's a glimpse. It's a glimpse of what heaven's all about. It's a glimpse about what God is all about. But you won't understand it if you don't understand how the pain and suffering and death lead to the resurrection. Without that, you miss it. Jesus' four-step method gets us down off the mountain or out of the hole with mysteries intact. The word mystery comes from a Greek word which means close your lips or shut my mouth. Mysteries cannot be described. Mysteries do something that does not work with words or images or even music. Music comes close. But mystery stands outside of our ability to comprehend it. I'm re-listening to a book called Proof of Heaven by Dr. Evan Alexander. He's trying to describe what his experiences were while he's in a comatose state and Ebola is eating his brains. There is nothing in his brains. And he's a neurosurgeon, so he knows. There's nothing in his brains that can be producing this vision, this experience. And all the way through, he says, it was like this, but that doesn't even come close. It was like the most beautiful music you could possibly hear, but that doesn't even come close. It's like globes of light that shimmer and move and leave a trail of all the colors of the rainbow, but that doesn't even come close. It's like asking a question without words and hearing the answer inserted into me without words, and there are no words, and yet it's the true answer. This is what Jesus is sharing with us something that's outside and beyond what we can handle. And so we get up, come down, keep quiet, and then when it hits you, when it all comes together, we need to go shout about it. We don't do that much. We're kind of afraid of having the right words. Well, you can't have the right words, but you can say something like, it's God in my life. How can you do that? It's God in my life. Yeah. And it changes everything. Bonnie sent around on Facebook a really neat clip. I don't know if you saw that or not. Those who are on Facebook may have. She may have sent it around by email. It's about a fellow who normally took the subway. He lived like in New York. He took the subway to a stop that was about 2 or 3 blocks from his home. He'd get off there, and he would walk in the middle of the night, late night, because he'd always stop at this restaurant, all-night diner, and get something to eat. Well, that one night he got off, the streets were empty, and this guy shows up with a knife, and he says, give me your money. And this guy said, fine, sure. He took out his wallet and just gave him the whole wallet. And he said, you know, what you're doing is pretty cold out. You're going to have a long night tonight. Not many people around. Here, take my coat. Keep you warm. The guy says, what? He says, yeah, take my coat. By the way, I'm going to stop at the restaurant here for about, would you mind if I bought you dinner? The guy says, okay. He goes into the restaurant and they start to get their meal, and the fellow who's on his way home, who now no longer has a wallet or a coat, is saying hi to the wait staff and to the manager and to the dishwasher. And this robber mugger is saying, you know the dishwasher? You say hi to just the dishwasher? He said, sure. He's a person. I don't know why he would do that. Because he's a person. And I share life with a person. That's all. They got to the end of their meal, and the guy on his way home said, I got a little problem here. I invited you for dinner, but you have all my money. Could you give me back my wallet? The guy says, okay. So takes back the wallet. He opens up, pulls out a 20 and hands, here, this may help out for tonight. I hope something works right for you. But this is a trade. Please give me your knife in exchange. And the guy handed over his knife. Could you do that? When somebody is trying to rip you off? Just go ahead and do it. That's yelling the good news of Jesus Christ, that if you act with love, even to your enemy, even the person who threatens you, you have overcome the fear. You're no longer, I'm sure the guy had a lot of adrenaline working through him, but he's no longer a slave to the adrenaline like a grizzly bear. And you can give love to the least of these and yell to the whole world about your faith. This whole story that we just encountered, this mountaintop experience, you might call it a come and go after Jesus Christ. Come and go. You come to the mountain and you go back to reality. You come to the depression and you go back to reality. You come to church and then you go out into the world to serve the world as Jesus Christ.